All right, good day, everyone. Welcome to today's training on getting started with the British curriculum. Shortly, we'll start our training. I trust we've been having a great day today. So we will have the training shortly. Just stay put. Ensure that you are fully ready and set for the training. It's going to be quite impactful and interesting. So quickly, I would take off the sound so we start right away. So thank you once again for logging into this training. For those who are going to be having the replay, you will get that on our YouTube platform. You will get an access to watch it at the YouTube platform for those who make payment for the certificate. All right, so quickly we will start our training. All right, so thank you very much for coming in, logging in for this training. The training is all about the British curriculum. Sorry, just give me a minute and I want to get my slide sorted out. Okay, good. All right, so quickly, the training is about the British curriculum. We were doing something on getting started with the British curriculum. I'm very much aware that a lot of people want a sort of training on the British curriculum. We have had opportunity to discuss with a lot of persons in the education field. And one of the challenges a lot of persons are having, it's not necessarily because they don't do the British curriculum in their school, but the kind of methods they use whilst teaching. So that's the major challenge. And today we are going to be doing getting started with the British curriculum. And so quickly, without much ado, we go into the training. So as a way of introduction, this is CIBA Learning Hub. CIBA Learning Hub is one of the arms of CIBA, the CIBA Group. The CIBA Group covers the CIBA Consultancy and Training Services, the CIBA Learning Hub, and the CLH, that is CIBA Learning Hub's Recruit. So we also have the recruitment arm of CIBA. So today, the Learning Hub will be doing the training on getting started with the British curriculum. And the person that will be anchoring the training is none other than myself, Mr. Chukwuemeka Nikubere. I'm the head of training and head of center for CIBA Learning Hub. So I want us to get ourselves very much acquainted with whatever we're going to be saying. If you have questions, we'll take your questions when the time comes for questions. Just ensure that you give me some level of focus, because it's important that every bit of what we do, that you get some level of focus into it. Now, before we start the training, I just want to let us know that this training is just the beginning of a series of training on the British curriculum. So the very first thing we are doing is the introduction to the British curriculum. So first of all, we need to know if you have the basics, the background knowledge of the British curriculum, what you need to know, the structure of the British curriculum, and so on. And then before we go into teaching several subjects using the British curriculum, you have to know this before you progress to that stage. So the first part of the training is getting started with the British curriculum, all you need to know about the British curriculum, and then the next phase is going to be teaching specific subjects using the British curriculum. Now, for the British curriculum, we have some core subjects, and we'll talk about the core subject. It's the same with the Nigerian curriculum. We have the mathematics, we have the use of English, and we have the science. And for science, it's broken down into biology, chemistry, and physics. They are all infused in one subject, that is science. So we are going to be looking at that shortly. So like I mentioned, we will be starting, and then we have a series of training in January. Shortly, we are going to be rolling out the program for January. So we'll do teaching in mathematics using the British curriculum, teaching English using the British curriculum, and teaching science using the British curriculum. For our earliest practitioners, we are going to be having teaching using the EYFS, the earliest foundation stage. So it's going to be a series of training that you don't want to miss. It's going to be a series like I mentioned. And please ensure you don't miss any of these series, because it's important that if you must get into any British school to teach as a professional, you have to get acquainted with this concept we are going to be rolling out. Okay, All right, so without much ado, we are starting. So the first thing we have to do is we'll look at our objective for the day. So what is the objective for the day? So the very first thing on our objective we have is to describe the structure and key stages of the British curriculum. So we are going to be looking at the structure and the key stages of the British curriculum. And besides the structure and the key stages of the British curriculum, we would also look at, the next thing we'll look at is exploring the national curriculum and examination boards. So we have the British national curriculum, that's what we are looking at today. So we explore the national curriculum and examination boards, and then discuss subject-specific pedagogy, assessment, and progression. We may not get up to that stage. Like I mentioned, this is just the introduction, and then we'll progress as we go into several other parts of the series. Okay, so quickly let's go to our next slide. All right, so I'll have to reduce my camera for you to be able to see this effectively. Okay, all right. So the starter is discussing your understanding of a British curriculum. So what do you understand by a curriculum, not British curriculum now? What is your understanding of a curriculum? So you have like 30 seconds to get that done. What is your understanding of the British curriculum? So kindly note down your understanding of what a curriculum is, and then also highlight the strengths and the weaknesses of the Nigerian curriculum. Yes, the first thing I said is discuss your understanding of the British curriculum. What do you understand the British curriculum to be? And secondly, highlight the strengths and the weaknesses of the Nigerian curriculum, because a lot of us, we are already exposed to using the Nigerian curriculum. Even if you have not taught using the Nigerian curriculum, the very fact that you've gone through school in Nigeria simply means that you've been taught using the Nigerian curriculum. So you have some level of awareness as far as the Nigerian curriculum is concerned. So quickly sort this out in 30 seconds, and then we'll be back to continue with this. Okay, so we are back. So we'll go to the next slide. All right. I haven't gotten those explanations because of time. We have to progress to the next slide. All right. So what is the British curriculum? So we want to look at some key elements and parts of the British curriculum that you need to know. Now, the first thing you need to understand about the British curriculum is that the British curriculum has a global appeal. It has a global appeal. It's very important that we get to know this. The British curriculum has a global appeal. It simply means that wherever you go in the world, they use the British curriculum. Over 100 countries actually have something to do with the British curriculum. So you've heard of the Cambridge curriculum. Now let me just explain this. Now the Cambridge curriculum is no different from the British curriculum. It's gotten from the British curriculum. It's just that for the Cambridge curriculum, it is international. You've heard of the Cambridge Assessment International. It's an assessment body, and they have their curriculum. Now, the curriculum is extracted from the British curriculum. They might have some little bit of structural differences, but not necessarily as it affects content. So it's from the British curriculum. And in the most recent time, even the Cambridge curriculum, they've expanded it to include some elements of the American and the Canadian curriculum. Okay, all right. So it has a global appeal. So when we talk about the British curriculum, we are also talking about the Cambridge curriculum. So if you can teach using the Cambridge curriculum, it's as good as you teaching using the British curriculum. So the Cambridge curriculum has a global appeal, meaning everyone around the world would want to have something to do with the British curriculum or the Cambridge curriculum because of their pedagogies, their methodologies, and beyond that, they have an examination structure. And the very fact that if you are a student in Nigeria, for example, and you have used the British curriculum, or you have done one of the exams, the Cambridge Checkpoint exam or the IGCSE exam, now it's assumed that you have done an international exam. So when you go beyond Nigeria to other countries, it gives you an additional advantage. Okay, so it has a global appeal. So for schools that would want to have, in terms of enrollments, if you want to get a lot of enrollments, you have to start thinking about getting registered as a British curriculum school or as a Cambridge school. Now, if you do that, it gives you that added advantage because a lot of parents, especially in some part of the country, would want their children to attend your school because of the advantage of using the British curriculum. So it has a global appeal. The second thing about the British curriculum is that it is a child-centered curriculum. Okay, it does child-centered learning, and that is very, very important. It does the child-centered learning. Okay, how do I mean? Now, if we look at the traditional method of teaching, for those of us who are teachers and you are part of this, if you look at the traditional method of teaching, you will discover something that usually the teacher is at the forefront, is at the center of learning, of teaching and learning. So you can see a teacher in front of the classroom, and the teacher is talking to the learners, is talking to the students, and they are all listening to the teacher. So you can imagine that the teacher has a lot to do. The teacher stands before the children for about 30 minutes for a 40 minutes class or duration. The teacher teaches for like 30 minutes talking or doing everything himself. Learners have little or nothing to do except for maybe a class activity or an assignment to be done. But for the British curriculum, the child leads on the learning. So the teacher facilitates the learning process. You get to understand that as we progress. Like I said, this is just an introduction. So the child leads on the learning and is child-centered. So you have a lot to do with collaborative activities and the rest of it. In fact, when you come to the classroom, the structure of the British curriculum or the Cambridge classroom is different from the structure of our local classroom, because in that case, it is the kind of learning that determines how this classroom is structured. Okay? Now, the British curriculum is structured into key stages. As we progress, we get to understand the various key stages using the British curriculum. And beyond that, it prepares learners for the future. It prepares learners for the future. Now, the challenges we have sometimes with what we do oftentimes is the fact that most of the things we do, our methods, our content, is centered around the now. In fact, can I be very honest with you? If we look at the Nigerian curriculum sometimes and our content, we still talk about things from the past. I'm not talking about you teaching history. That is quite okay if you're teaching history. You have to go back to the past. But you want to teach a child mathematics, you want to teach a child science, and most of the things you use as your concepts will usually talks about the past, and is not futuristic. Even the way you assess them, you don't put elements of the future into it. For example, you want to look at the Cambridge text, for example. You see some of the content of the text. For example, let's talk about their comprehension or their science. You see some things as some elements of fiction, some things that you know it's not real. But one thing you need to understand is they can project into the future, and they bring what they hope to see in the future into our daily texts. And so when the learners read it, it prepares their mind for things that could happen in the future. I remember back in school, in 100 level, one of my lecturers, he taught mathematics, Math 101 or 111, and he said something then. He said this, and I listened to him carefully. He said, do you know that in the nearest future, that man can actually be flying in the air? We all laughed about it. We felt it was unrealistic. It can't be possible. I'm not talking about the aeroplane. I'm talking about a man himself wearing something that is in the air. And lo and behold, two years ago, I saw something on TV. I saw a prototype of it. Someone wore something behind, like a jacket, and then clicked on something, and before you know it, he went up into the sky, and he moved in the sky and came down to the ground. And I was like, wow, this was what our lecturer told us about. So you can imagine if whatever we are teaching the learners will expose them into some elements of these futuristic, happenings. It makes them prepared for the future. So if they want to, for example, select some of the courses they would love to study, they won't be talking about all the time, I want to be a doctor, I want to be what do you call it, a lawyer, I want to be an accountant, because these are the trending courses that learners or children in our climb would want to go for. But this time around, because you are giving them elements of the future, they start thinking about what they want to study in the future, and they look at what what they have, they're currently studying the content of their texts, the fictions and things like that. They can now use that to decide or to determine what they want to study. In time past, not so many persons talked about things like data analytics. Today, it's so big. In fact, the whole social media space is data analytics. For example, you go and you want to check on something as good as maybe education, or you are so good with what do you call it now? You're so good with fashion, and you've clicked on a particular ad or something on fashion on Facebook. You've just clicked on it twice, and before you know it, every time you go on Facebook, you are given an ad that specifically showcases something on fashion design, and the rest of you wondering how come. All along I've not been seeing that on my social media page, but today, every time now I keep seeing it. You know why? Now data analytics has to deal with a lot of things. They pick information and as quick as possible. So there's a program that helps to harvest information. So when you discover that you clicked on this, it helps you harvest various ads and information that had to do with that, because they feel through the process they want to specifically meet your need. And that's what we have to be doing even in our classrooms when we talk about differentiation. Meeting specific needs, not just throwing things to the public. Okay? So that's what we are talking about. So it prepares learners for the future. Now, it's more applicable. It's not just about content. If you have been or you've ever used the Bloom's taxonomy, the basis of the Bloom's taxonomy is the first thing you have there is comprehension, knowledge, or remember. From there you go to understanding or comprehension, and then you go to application, and then you move further, synthesis, evaluation, and Now, you understand that oftentimes what we find in our local context, in our classrooms, is the fact that we have a lot of content on knowledge. We have a lot of content that just assess learners on knowledge. If we go beyond, sometimes it's comprehension, that's understanding, and we end there. Little application is seen in what we are doing, and sometimes you can't even see creativity. Okay, but for the British curriculum, it's more applicable. If you look at the assessment, it's applicable. You can walk along your streets because you are using the British curriculum, and you start applying what you've learned with everything you see or observe around your environment. So that's the beauty of the British curriculum. Like I said, this is just the introduction. So we are getting started with the British curriculum. So our next slide. So the next thing is, what are the differences between the British curriculum and the Nigerian curriculum? I asked the question at the beginning, what are the differences between the British curriculum and the Nigerian curriculum? Okay, so we'll quickly look at some differences. Okay, now one of the differences you could find there is the content, the textbooks and the subjects. Okay, the content, what you find as the content in the British curriculum might be different from that of the Nigerian curriculum. All right, like I mentioned, you have more of applications and creativity, whereas the Nigerian curriculum, you hear people asking what is, define, list, states as a way of assessing knowledge, and knowledge as an assessment just comes directly. So it doesn't give room for people to have to critically think about something. So it doesn't really celebrate more of critical thinking and problem solving skills. All right, the method of teaching and learning, and you also find the lesson plan structure. These are things that as we move on, you get to understand it, because like I said, it's an introduction, so I may not have to go deep into it. So final examination and assessment structure, they have their final examination. For example, like I mentioned, for the primary, you have the Cambridge primary checkpoint. You go to the secondary, you have the year 9 checkpoint, which is the key stage 3, the checkpoint, and then you have your IGCSE for key stage 4. I'm talking about the British curriculum. Now, the key stage structure will be given to you shortly, and then we'll explain. I'll take you through that structure. So we have the names of terms used in the session for each school season or session. We have, for Nigerian, of course, we have first term, we have second term, we have third term. Okay, but there you have summer, you have autumn, you have spring. Okay, they not necessarily first, second, or third term. All right, then we also have the classroom and school environment outlook. Now, it's important when you step into a typical British school or a school that uses the British curriculum that are a bit deliberate about their practice, one of the things you find is the nature of their displays and everything they have is so intentional. They are so intentional about um, using what learners can see on the wall, what they can see around them, to pass out content, to deliver content, and also to spark some level of creativity and critical thinking skills in the learners. For example, you step into one of the British curriculum school and in the classroom. If you go to our classrooms, for example, you find a lot of things on the wall. Some of the things you find on the wall, you find I'm not saying it's wrong. The multiplication table, 2 times 1, 2, 2 times 3, 4, and so you find some diagrams, pictures of the human skeleton labeled and the rest of it. But sometimes, if you are someone who is teaching using the British curriculum, you get to understand that there are diverse methods. Okay, when you put something on the wall, I'm talking about display. Sometimes you don't put out everything as giving them, spoon feeding them. You can do it in such a way that you create some gaps, and then because of the fact that they are attracted to that picture and you created some gaps, they start thinking, what could this be used for? You provide them with a picture which is a little bit of scaffold, assisting them with recalling. And then the next thing is, what could it be used for? Instead of you putting a picture, the name and the rest of it, now they start thinking, what could this be used for? All right. So we also have the method of discipline. It's quite different. Okay, even though in a Nigerian setting, a lot of schools are beginning to upgrade or upgrade their method of discipline, not accepting corporal punishments anymore. All right, so that's for that. So we go to the main one for today. Please, I think I may have to. The main one for today, and so we'll look at the key stages. All right. So quickly we'll look at the key stages in the British curriculum. The key stages in the British curriculum. So it's important that we get to understand the key stages using the British curriculum. So I'll quickly take us through the key stages using the British curriculum. All right. So quickly, without much waste of time, I'll take us through the key stages using the British curriculum. All right. So for the key stages, we have the key stage 1, we have key stage 2, we have key stage 3, and we have key stage 4. In fact, beyond that, we also have key stage 5. All right. So for key stage 1, before key stage 1, we have, for example, we have the EYFS stage. We call that the early years foundation stage, and it's usually between 0 to 5 years of age. So of course we know there's no child who is 0. However, we're talking about from the scratch, okay, to 5 years of age. That's the early years foundation stage. All right. So that's in the Nigerian setting. That's like the nursery, reception class, and so on. All right. So you are moving from that to key stage 1. Now key stage 1 deals with the year groups 1 and 2. For the Nigerian setting, the year groups are primary 1 and 2. But for the British setting, that's key stage 1. And it deals with year 1 and year 2. Nigerian setting is primary 1 and primary 2. So please get to understand that. Now the age bracket is between 5 to 7 years of age. So you find those ones in key stage 1. Please, we have to understand this. For the British curriculum, they don't appreciate so much of learners skipping classes, because they believe that for every age bracket there is a body of content that they should be able to grab and assimilate. So they work within that body of content. But of course, we know for the Nigerian curriculum, because let me say this good thing about the Nigerian curriculum: the very fact that it's a bit rigorous, it's a bit tough in terms of content. It's rigorous and it's tough in terms of content. But the only challenge there is so much of knowledge, so much of knowledge. So regardless of how deep the contents are, learners will have to start cramming, memorizing, Roth method of teaching, and the rest of it. But for the British curriculum, they don't have so deep a content for learners at a particular age. As you grow, they believe that the depth of your content should go, not taking a child from year 3 to do something that a child in year 6 is already doing. All right, so key stages 2 caters to learners between the ages of 7 to 11. So, and that's for primary 3 to 6. For the British curriculum, it's year group 3 to 6. So that's key stage 2. For the Nigerian school, oftentimes you hear people say lower primary, primary 1, 2, and 3, upper primary 4, 5, and 6, but it's different because for the British curriculum, it has key stage 1 and key stage 2. Key stage 1 is ages 5 to 7, and year 1 and 2. Key stage 2 is ages 7 to 11, and that is year 3 to 6. That is from year 3 to the examination class, which is year 6. That is key stage 2. And then for key stage 3, we are now moving from the primary school to the secondary school. And for key stage 3, we have from the age group of 11 to 14. Age group of 11 to 14. And so we are looking at the year 7 to year 9. And for the Nigerian setting, you call that GSS 1 to GSS 3. That is key stage 3. Now, at the end of year 6, let me say that at the end of year 6, that is key stage 2, learners sit for an external exam. That's their first external exam they'll be sitting for, and that's called the Cambridge Checkpoint Exam. They sit for their checkpoint examination at year 6. Then at year 9, they sit for their key stage 3 checkpoint. They call it the year 9 checkpoint. That's the second external exam they'll be writing, just as we sit for our GSS 3 exam. They sit for their year 9 checkpoint examination. And then key stage 4 caters to ages 14 to 16, and that's year groups 10 to 11, and that is SS1 to SS2, because they assume that by SS3, that's the examination class. So they should finish their learning, or learning should terminate at year 11, and then year 12 is the exam class, and that's where they do their IGCSE examination for the secondary. And of course, key stage 5 deals with the preparatory, university preparatory classes or colleges for some schools. Okay, so now let's look at the core subjects in the British curriculum. So we have English, mathematics, and science. Now these are core subjects. They are taken across board from scratch, from the beginning to key stage 5 or 5 years 5. They do mathematics, English, and science, and because they are core subjects. They also have subjects they call the foundation subjects. We have the arts and design. Arts and design starts from key stage 1 to key stages 3. So they don't do it at key stage 4. So citizenship, it starts at key stage 3 and down to key stage 4. So they don't do it at key stages 1 to 2. Computing, they do it from key stage 1 to all the way down to 4 because of the relevance of computing. Design and technology, they do that from key stage 1, key stage 2, and key stage 3. They don't do it at key stage 4. So if you've been to a typical British curriculum school, you discover that learners, even from year 1, they are getting exposed to some good technological skills and content, because that is the way to go. So we also have the languages. Key stage 1 doesn't do that, but from key stages 2 and key stages 3. And then we have history. History, key stage 1, key stage 2, and key stage 3, they do history. But key stage 4 upward, they don't do history. Music, the same thing, and then physical and health education, the same thing, from key stages 1 to key stages 3, and key stage 4, they don't do it. All right. And like I mentioned to you, you begin to appreciate more of the teaching using the British curriculum when we start teaching specific subjects using the British curriculum, because you get to understand more of the pedagogies, the methodologies, and how to effectively teach their content, and also be exposed to their curriculum. Someone asked me, Mr. Chiku, after this training, are you going to give us the curriculum? I said, we'll look into that. However, we can give you some of this curriculum, but you understand that this training is actually a free training. Nobody paid for this training. The only thing we sell is for those who want certificate, because we don't give our certificate as free certificates. Anybody who wants certificate will pay a token, and even that amount that we stipulated for certificate is lower than what we should charge for our certificate as CIBA. Of course, CIBA is an international training organization that trains within Nigeria and outside Nigeria. So we don't just give out our certificate. So we just wanted to tie something to the certificate. So at least if you want a certificate, you can get it at that token. Okay? So, but for other trainings, it's going to be paid. And we are rolling out the plan so far, shortly. So please, when you get that, I would advise that you register as quick as possible, because we want to be to ensure that we cater to everyone specifically to their needs and we know them as they come. All right, so we will look at the next one. Besides that, now let's look at the next. Sorry, excuse me. Just a minute. Just a minute. All right, so we look at the next one, and that is it's the, sorry, I think this is good. So that's the religious education and sex and relationship education. So for religious education, okay, let me say this, the way they teach it is quite different from the way we teach our religious education here in Nigeria. Our religious education, for example, we do them separately in isolation. We teach, for example, we have the two major religions in Nigeria. We have the Christian religion and the Islamic religion. So for Nigeria, we do the IRS, Islamic religious knowledge, and we have the CRS, Christian religious knowledge. But over there, the teachers, they are all embedded. In fact, they don't restrict religious education to just IRS and CRS. So the content you find the Christian content, you find the Islamic content, you find the Buddhist content, you find content on the Jewish religion, that is Judaism. So it exposes you to various religion. Now, it's not in any way trying to indoctrinate anyone. In fact, it's just exposing one to what other religions they do. For example, of course, those who are Muslims and Christians, sometimes you could see a Christian preacher who knows some stuff in terms of in the Muslim content. Also, you see some Muslim preachers who know, they have read the Bible, they also know, they have some content knowledge in terms of the Christian religious content. That's because it's open for study. You can go or you want to know something about them. Likewise, other religion. So it's not in any way trying to indoctrinate anyone, but it's trying to expose people to other religion, and in such a way it also helps religious tolerance. Okay, so we move to, so all state schools are also required to make provision for a daily act of collective worship and must teach religious education to pupils at every key stage, and sex and relationship education to pupils in secondary education. So like we said, it's we're doing training based on teaching using the British curriculum. However, most schools in Nigeria, they know what they take out from the British curriculum and they do a blend. Even the ones that do a pure British curriculum, not all subjects or content they take in, because sometimes they put a local context into the picture. All right, so we go to the next one now. So we go to the next one, and that's history, teaching history using history, key stage 1 of history. Okay, so for history, there are lots of things for us to get to know here. Excuse me. All right, so pupils are taught changes within living memory. Where appropriate, these should be used to reveal aspects of changes in national life. So they are taught changes within living memory. So you could practically take them through some changes that have happened, teaching history, and then also events beyond living memory. So changes within living memory, whilst a lot of persons were alive, but beyond living memory. So someone is talking about a million year ago, 200 years ago, and things like that. You quite understand that is, they are talking about events beyond living memory. Okay, they are significant nationality or global or globally. They are significant nationally or globally. For example, the Great Fire of London, the first airplane flight, or events commemorated through festivals or anniversaries. So these are, we are talking about things that have been, that has happened, and you can hardly find anybody who is still alive who witnessed it. However, these things happened, so they are beyond living memory. And so they also look at the lives of significant individuals in the past who have contributed to national and international achievements. So they compare aspects of life. You can see that talking about comparing aspects of life, it's emboldened. Now I want to say something about teaching history using the British curriculum. Now they celebrate more of skills. If you look at their framework, the British curriculum framework, you discover that they celebrate more of skills rather than just content. So they look at some skills that they hope to drive into the learners. For example, comparison is a skill. the act of comparing between two things. If you understand that very well, it's an analytical skill. It's one of the analytical skill because you could hold this and hold this, and you can be able to compare, and with that you'll be able to reach a good evaluation. So they compare aspects of life in different periods. For example, Elizabeth I and Queen Victoria, Christopher Columbus and Neil Armstrong, and then we have William Caston and Tim Berners-Lee. We have Peter Bruegel the Elder and Ellis Lowry, and you have Rosa Parks and Emily Davison, and we have Mary Seacole and Florence Nightingale and Edith Cavell. So they can compare aspects of lives of these people, and it's important because when you start looking at these skills, comparing aspects, you tend to learn better than the way sometimes most of us were taught. When we were taught, sometimes they just come and roll out history, so we're expected to cram these things or read and just put them in our head. So little or not so much was done about comparison, because when you give learners opportunity to look at different contexts, and begin to compare them, it's an advantage, and it gives them some additional height. So significant historical events are also looked into, people and places in their local community. All right. So for time, we'll go quickly to the next one. All right. So let's look at geography. So geography is more contextual. We look at more contextual knowledge. We look at more locational knowledge. Of course, locational knowledge, more spatial awareness of the world's countries, the spatial awareness. We look at understanding compass point. Compass. Of course, we have an idea of that. Use maps and atlases. They don't play with that. So not just having, sometimes you want to teach someone, you have to draw, or you just bring a map. Okay. Now, besides that, they use their atlases, they use their maps and atlases. Learners have the ability to look into these things, to be able to look at the spatial awareness of the world's countries and their location. Okay. So these things are gotten, and they are done in a more practical way compared to the theoretical approach a lot of us used whilst we were learning. So we also go to the science. Okay, we go straight to the science. Now, for science encourages curious inquiry. Now, when I started working with a British school, the first time I taught using the British curriculum, the first time I taught was teaching science. Now, the first year I taught them, and then we did the Cambridge checkpoint. I observed something, that after the examination, often they give you feedback, the examiner's feedback and things like that, to know how each learner they fared. I now discovered that one of the gaps I had then was scientific inquiry, beyond just practical. Looking at scientific inquiry, how do you arrive at a particular conclusion? These are things they do a lot in science, so they celebrate that a lot. So asking simple questions and recognizing that they can be answered in different ways. So unlike the way we want, in fact, some teachers and even lecturers want in our time want learners to give them what's given to them. So give it to me as I've given it to you. It's not the best way to learn. So they ask simple questions and recognize that learners can have diverse way of responding to these questions. So oftentimes you see in their content beyond science, you see keywords, and these are things that they don't play with, because every time learners even attempt the assessment, there are some keywords that could give them a pass, because it's important that, because learners will definitely respond to some questions in different ways, and they recognize that. Observing closely, using simple equipment, they perform simple tests, they do identifying and classifying. So they are able to classify, even down to key stage 1, they identify and they classify. You see, so it's important, and using the observation and ideas to suggest answers to questions. So they do this a lot. You can even have some British assessment papers where they would ask you to suggest answers to questions. You've not even attempted it, but you're suggesting answers. And there are some criteria or some ways you can actually go about that. Anyways, like I mentioned, we are going to be doing specific training on teaching science using the British curriculum. So you get to understand, that's my field though. I love it, even though I also do a lot with mathematics in the British curriculum. So gathering and recording data to help in answering questions. So learners don't just sit in the classrooms. You give them the objectives and off they go. They can be in a field trying to gather and collect information. They get that. They do that a lot. And these data, they bring them to the classrooms. And when they want to represent their data, they could use different means of representing data. They don't just use just numbers or words. They can actually use pictures, because sometimes learners could go to a particular field or a space to collect data, and some organisms, for example, they don't know them, they've not seen them before. So how would they collect data for that? So sometimes they could use pictures, or they could use, if they don't have cameras, they could really do a quick diagram, drawing of that organism. So it helps to get to a particular conclusion, because then they start looking at inquiry process. Does it have wings? If it has wings, fine. Does it have two wings? Things like that. All right. So we go to the next one. Time is of essence. We are running out of time. So quickly, we look at computing. It's a very important change. ICT, as we know, it will go, and instead of ICT as we know it will go, and instead pupils are expected to understand and apply the fundamental principles and concepts of computer science, including abstraction, logic, algorithms, and data representation. They analyze problems in computational terms. They have repeated practical experience of writing computer programs. These are things they do. Okay, and I said computing starts from what? Key stage 1. So they do that a lot. Why? Because they know these are things the learner should learn from scratch in order to solve problems. So they can evaluate and apply information technology, including new or unfamiliar technologies, analytically to solve problems. Okay, they are responsible, competent, confident, and creative users of information and communication technology. We are now running. So we go to the English, use of English. So the National Curriculum for English aims to ensure that all pupils read fluently. Please take note of this. Sometimes we have learners who want to take the Cambridge checkpoint. In fact, they just introduced it in their school for the first year, and that year 6 wants to take Cambridge checkpoint. They've never been taught using the British curriculum from year 1 to year 5, and now at year 6 they want to sit for it. Now the challenges are so enormous. We have children in Nigeria that in year 7, that's JSS1, they are still struggling with their not just reading and even speaking and writing. So, but here they celebrate reading fluently, speaking, and also writing with good understanding. So they develop the habit of reading widely and often for both pleasure and information. So there's what they call reading for pleasure, and that they use to help the learners a lot. It helps to build their vocabulary, they make them come to terms with the structure and how to effectively use English. So they acquire a wide vocabulary, an understanding of grammar, and knowledge of linguistic conventions for reading, writing, and spoken language. So they appreciate our rich and varied literary heritage. All right, they write clearly, accurately, and coherently, adapting their language and style in and for a range of contexts, purposes, and audiences. So they use discussion in order to learn. They should be able to elaborate and explain clearly their understanding and ideas. So these learners must be competent in their art of speaking and listening. So listening skills is so important, because oftentimes we are in an environment where we don't really pay so much attention to listening skills, and we talk about communication. Now, one of the best way of communicating is to be able to listen attentively. So when you're speaking to someone, do you speak because you just wanted to respond to give a stronger argument, or do you listen? Because oftentimes when we are communicating, sometimes what we do is during our communication, we tend to want to respond to someone because we feel what the person is saying is superior, so I need to give the person a higher, judgment or whatever. But in that case, you have not really listened, because listening skills is very, very good, and it's an integral part of communication. So they don't play with their punctuations, their spelling, and the grammar. They call it the SPAG: spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And you know one thing, in their English text, these 3 I just mentioned, they are embedded. They are not taught in isolation. So they teach punctuation as embedded, grammar as embedded, and spelling as embedded. Because the best way to teach it is to teach it embedded, not separately. And that's some of the challenges we are having. Our learners would learn grammar separately, punctuation separately, and spelling separately. And then when it comes to the art of using it, it becomes a challenge. So they don't do that. All right. So thank you so much. We have gotten to the end of this session. Like I told you, is the starting point, is getting started with the British curriculum. So let's have some deep reflection. Some of us, we've actually taught using the British curriculum, but we are in a school where we're not taking from scratch. So we have some foundational challenges in terms of the British curriculum. So one of the things you start thinking about is you're thinking about the little we've talked about today. And what do you really want to know about the British curriculum? I want you to start thinking about that. Reflect on it, because when we start rolling out our other series in terms of teaching science, maths, English, even the EYFS using the British curriculum, you now know what to look out for. And then you understand their various methodologies and how best to teach using the British curriculum. So once again, I don't know if you have any question. If you have a question, please use on the YouTube page. Please kindly type on the comment or the chat comments your questions, and it's going to be responded to at any given time. So even if it's going to be next week, you will get a response from us. Okay, so I want to say this. This is our contact. Like I mentioned, this is CIBA Learning Hub and CIBA Consultancy and Training Services. You can actually contact us using this number 0902 054 3888 or 0912 460 7397. Now, if you want to be a part of our subsequent trainings, please contact us, let us know. And if you have some special or specific trainings you would want, we do trainings across board. Like I mentioned, across the country. We were recently when Ibadan, Delta State, that's where we're in Delta State, we're at Ibadan, we're in Port Harcourt to do a series of training for several schools. And even in Abuja, we do a lot of trainings as well. We are based in Abuja. So if you want us to come into your school to do some sort of trainings, please give us a call and we will do that. You can also send us a mail on head of center. Please, the head of center, the H is a small letter, not a capital letter. Okay, so it's headofcenter.cibalearninghub@gmail.com. And then follow us on our Facebook channel on CIBA Consultancy and Training Services, Nigerian Education's Lounge, and CIBA Learning Hub. So if you want to follow us, you want to get a lot about what we've been doing, you can go to our CIBA Learning Hub Facebook page. You'll find us there. And then the CIBA Consultancy is also an arm of CIBA. If you want us to come consult for your school, you can also send a mail to us. And also follow us on our CIBA Consultancy page. You could also send a message on Instagram and also on Facebook. We would respond. We also have our YouTube page. Recently we had to start our YouTube page, and we've been doing quite some things on our YouTube page, and we have a lot to be done on the YouTube page. So please ensure you follow us on our YouTube page for other information. So once again, thank you for your time. If you have any question, like I mentioned, put it on the chat box and then we'll respond to you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure doing this training section with you. My name once again is Mr. Ochuko Imonibere. Thank you so much. Do have a lovely day ahead. Thank you.